Everyone, thank you for joining us for this space discussion hosted by the Amhara Association of America. We will begin our program shortly. We're just giving a few more minutes for everyone to join. Be patient with us. We'll be beginning the space discussion shortly. Thank you. Robil and Hone, I just want to test the mic. Can you both hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Robil, how about you? Right. Okay, we'll wait for Robil. And Hone, be on the lookout for our other guests and promote them as soon as they join. And I'll be doing the same. I'll be on the lookout also.
Sure.
ሳትነው አላቅ የመቀሌ ሳትነው ምጽዋ ድረስ ሳትነው ቀኘው ነው የሚባለው ሳትነው የመኮንን ፈር ሳትነው አረኖ
Les promos d'été sont arrivés avec des frais de livraison.
Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for our guest speakers. Professor Adamu, I see you're on the listener, on the speaker, I think. Can you try speaking now, just to test?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. And Dr. Sanait, can you also test the mic?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. So we're just waiting for one more speaker, Acham, but we will be beginning this session or discussion in a few minutes. I think, yeah, just bear with us for a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Hi team, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a very special session planned for you today. We're just waiting for our final speaker to join us, but we'll try and get started about 10 minutes after the hour. For those who can't stay for the whole period, this session will be recorded and made available later. So please stay tuned for that. In the meantime, please listen, share the link with your friends or anyone who you think is interested in listening. And we're going to have a very interesting discussion. If we have time later, we'll also do a Q&A. But we're going to be getting to a lot of the current pressing issues. And we have a very special panel of guests who can really share some very interesting insights with you from their various fields of expertise. So thank you all for joining. And we're going to try and play some music until the program begins. Thank you.
For those of you who have just joined us, we're waiting a few more minutes to give one of our guests a chance to join. We will be beginning shortly. Thank you for joining this Twitter space and to be part of the discussion of the developments that are happening right now in Ethiopia, specifically in the Amhara region. So we have some guests here that will shed light on how we got here and what will be the next steps or the next phase of the Amhara movement as they continue to gain stride and capture more and more areas. So we'll begin our program shortly. Thank you. Team, I think we should get started. It's 1:10. If Achimel is able to join us, we will bring him on board and let him be part of the as a panelist to give his viewpoint on the developments. But let's just go on ahead and get started. Professor Adamu, Dr. Sanai, thank you for joining us today. Everyone, I want to appreciate all of you for joining and participating in this Twitter discussion. Last weekend, when we had our Twitter space discussion, the finals had captured some areas and taken control, primarily in Wollo. And fighting had just started in some parts of South Gondar. But we had said at that time that we had predicted that the finals would go on offensive in almost every part of the Amhara region, and would begin to capture more and more territory. And we gave the reasons behind that. But in less than a week, the finals have been able to capture significant cities such as Debre Burhan, Gondar, and other strategic locations. So this is a huge development, and we felt it was very important to brief the public about the situation on the ground right now. The impetus behind the finals going on the offensive, and capturing and administering these areas. What is the final goal? Of Amaras? What do they want to achieve? What would be really a lasting peaceful solution? The best outcome that we can have. And for Amaras is ending the genocide and subjugation, but there has to be a path forward. And what are also the various scenarios that could play out? And so we have a great lineup for you here. Not only with the AAA team with Rabel Adamu and Hone Mandefro, but also Dr. Senai, Professor Adamu, and hopefully Achimbele Tamru will also be able to join us. With that said, I want to turn it over to Robel and to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Robel. I just want to make sure Ted is able to hear you. Can you speak a bit?
Ted, can you hear my mic?
Okay.
Seems you can't hear.
Go ahead, Hone, take it, because I'm not able to hear Robel. I am able to hear Dr. Sanai.
Okay, we'll handle that. Robel, take it from here. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So shortly, we'll try and pin some relevant links above so that everyone can follow along. But basically, we have a very special session planned for everyone. And before we get into the individual remarks from the speakers, we have lots of updates from the ground. As Ted was mentioned earlier, there's been lots of updates on the ground, and the situation is very dynamic. And we've tried to actually provide daily updates from the AAA account, from Hona's account, and my own account, based on our information from our sources. And sorry, I'm just going to accept this invite. And then, so those of you who follow us, you can get those updates, and I'll try and see if I can pin them above. And I think one of the critical latest updates was mentioned earlier, and that was the capture of Debre Burhan city. Debre Burhan is the administrative capital of the North Shoa zone, and it's located in the southeastern central part of the Amhara region. And I think it's very important because the capture of the city marks a very significant milestone in the Amhara resistance. And recently, the armed struggle of the Fano against the unwarranted unilateral invasion by the federal army, led by the Oromo Prosperity Party, with complicity from the Amhara Prosperity Party. And this is a city that's located about 130 kilometers from the capital city of Addis Ababa. So just imagine, this is kind of what makes the conflict in Amhara region, or rather the war in Amhara region, diametrically different from, for example, an insurgency in Oromia or in the Tigray region. The Amhara region is strategically located so that it's actually very close to the center of the politics of the nation. And this means that an uprising in Amhara essentially makes it almost impossible for a central government to continue functioning in a normal capacity. And so for the outside for the foreign observers, for the medias, for the experts in the Horn of Africa analysts, this should be something that warrants a lot of attention and a lot of concern, because if you're looking for peace and stability in Ethiopia and the Amhara are revolting, you're not going to get that. And in the reverse, it's very clear also that no revolution in history was successful without the participation of the Amhara. And so I think we're going to try and make these updates available going forward as well. And so we invite you to follow our updates. And for example, yesterday there was a thread that covered some of these topics shared by Hona. And I invite everyone to read that thread. I'll see if I can pin it above. But the thread basically talks about some of the updates, especially in places like Ibn Addis, where now there's been an intensified campaign of mass arrests against ethnic Amharas. And so this is not any type of this is not motivated by political beliefs. It's not motivated by any type of investigation. This is blatant identity-based profiling and arrests of people numbering in the thousands. And so there was a case of a secondary school in the country, sorry, in the capital, being used as a concentration camp, and in some cases, reports of detainees being transported to unknown locations. And there were several reports of where some of those might be, including in other regions. And so it's very important for attention to be given to this issue. There are clearly human rights violations unfolding. There's war crimes unfolding. In a lot of these battles between the Fano and the federal forces, there's a trend towards urban combat. And unfortunately, the federal forces are actually beginning to aim their artillery strikes at densely populated areas where there are no military targets. And so these are civilian targets that are being targeted. These are hospitals. These are schools being used as military camps. These are, in some cases, UNESCO heritage sites. In the recent fighting near Gondar, and Gondar is really the most populous city in the Amhara region. So you can imagine how devastating a war in the city could be. There was actually reports of the ENDF firing artillery at the University of Gondar Hospital, which serves over 7 million people, and not just people from Amhara region, but also from Tigray. And you can imagine also how the recent conflict in Sudan has led to an influx of migrants from that area as well, who are also likely using these types of resources. So it's very devastating. And there was also reports of attacks on the Fasil Gibbi castles. And so this is also a very concerning development, because UNESCO heritage sites, these are really precious heirlooms who have persisted centuries of warfare, of political strife, and are now at risk because the federal force believes that it can that part of its campaign requires the destruction of the identity and heritage of the Amhara people. And this is also it doesn't help that the federal army is no longer an inclusive or pan-Ethiopian army, but rather one that's now largely dominated by the people from the Oromo ethnic group. But particularly, these are people who have been exposed to propaganda by the Oromo Prosperity Party, by the officials in power, to essentially see the Amhara as a problem that needs to be essentially wiped out. So the connotations are very genocidal. And there was also instances of the federal forces killing students and vigilators who were trying to write exams. And this happened in Gondar as well as in other places, such as Waldia University as well, in the North Wadlow area. And while all of this is happening, there are also reports of mobilization of Tigrayan special forces or fighters of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And this also underscores the need for a revisiting of the Pretoria Agreement, which Amhara has criticized for a long time now, under the argument that this was not a deal to bring peace, but rather a bilateral agreement in a multilateral conflict, in which there was a desire to form a new strategic alliance between the Oromo Prosperity Party and the TPLF. And now we're seeing the fruits of that, resulting in an alliance, an open alliance, not just on the physical war front, but even in the digital space as well. For those who are tracking hate speech, who are tracking propaganda, disinformation, it's very apparent that now pro-TPLF, pro-Abiy regime, pro-OLA activists, influencers, and medias have essentially aligned once again to intensify their anti-Amhara propaganda, and in many cases sharing dehumanizing posts, discrediting reports of attacks on civilians, and essentially supporting this genocidal war on the Amhara people. So this should be condemned. And as many of you here I know are very good activists who have been bringing attention to some of these human rights violations. This is something that requires our undivided attention and needs to be exposed. And so with that, I'll give the floor to Hona. Hona, if there's anything that I missed, please go ahead.
I think you provided a good overview, Robel. Just to add more specific uplifts on the situation, the ground from today, I think one of the important developments is in Amhara, which is the capital city of the regional state, where Fano and region forces were fighting. And in those fightings, I think increasingly the Fano has expanded its control of the city, and new units have surrendered, and police stations such as the Nines police station, which is a very famous police station that's often used to detain political dissidents and Fanos in the past became under control of Fano. And obviously the business and roads are closed, and people are staying home unless they are supporting the Fanos, expressing their solidarity. But also I think one trend Robel has outlined is the regime is increasingly trying to avoid fighting with Fano. Instead, they kind of install their heavy artillery from mountainous place, and then they fire into civilians. And as a result of that, actually, today, early today, a student that went into the Barda University to take an entrance examination, and her family member that went to kind of to try to get her out of campus were injured by NDF soldiers. Surrounding Bardar, I mean, almost every area is under Fano. Some strategic towns such as Tisabai, which is the town where the Tisabai power station, electricity power station is sited, and there federal police units were camped, and they surrendered to Fano without fighting. So Tisabai, Tilili, and Moro Roda since Gojam has become under Fano control. Today in Gondar, situation is still very concerning because, as Robel has said, although major part of the city is still under Fano control, NDF still is firing to residential areas, to the Fasil Kebi campus, which is a UNESCO registered heritage and really a defining feature of Gondar. So they are, firing to civilians and residential areas, and this has become, a pattern everywhere. They are doing the same thing. In Wallo areas, North Wallo is a little bit calm today. They were fighting here and there, but not a major combat today. But in South Wallo areas, new areas have been liberated. And there's a fighting in Shoa. Obviously, there's fighting near Debrecen and Debrecena. So those are two important places. But other than those two, the kind of the whole zone has been under Fano control. But I think the more concerning, and that's really important for Tripoli as well, is the war crimes that have already been committed, such as firing two hospitals, using university campus to as a station. For instance, at the University of Gondar, NDF soldiers killed federal police units who were stationed in the University of Gondar because they refused to let them enter into the university and fire Zu-23 and other heavy artillery things from the mountainous part of Maraki campus to the city. And we've seen the similar trend happening in Debre Marcos. Debre Marcos, again, students and invigilators for this ongoing national and university entrance exam have been injured and killed. And we also have seen civilians being detained for allegedly for supporting Fano. We've seen this in Kopo. We've seen this in some places within near Debre Marcos as well. So I think what has become abundantly clear is the NDF forces are not interested in fighting the Fanos directly, but actually they are more interested in distraction and scaring civilians, prosecuting civilians. And it looks like the intention is to really make the population kind of be scared by firing to everyone, and hoping that civilian casualties will eventually weaken Fano. Obviously, this is a violation of international humanitarian law and crime law, so war engagement laws. So I guess this has to be really something we want journalists and anyone who is concerned about civilian safety to raise alarm. We are expecting continuing of this trend, but also escalating through use of drones and air force or fighters, and I think this will have a catastrophic impact on the civilians because these are major cities, and every indication so far is that India forces are determined to keep the fighting in urban areas and refuse to kind of engage outside the urban areas. So that's, I think, a major update we want to add to what Robel has said. I guess that would be enough for now, Robel, in terms of update.
Excellent. Thank you, Hona. So now, just a quick reminder, we've now pinned some of the tweets above, and I think it's going to be very informative for those who want to refer to some of these references later. And we were expecting one other panelist, Atwa Chamila. I don't know if he's going to be able to join us, but if not, we can actually have somebody else go before. And I think I'd like to, maybe we can have Professor Adamu go first. Professor Adamu, if you're able to go first, please unmute your mic and you can go ahead.
Okay.
And Prof, maybe if you can start with a bit of intro for those who don't know you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Professor Adamu, if you're speaking, your voice has been interrupted for some reason.
Okay, I guess probably have to go
Yeah.
to. Oh, now you're back. Can you try speaking now?
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Whenever I turn on my, how about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was trying to say that many years ago, I tried to make
hello, Professor Adamu. Again, I think there's your mic was interrupted. We can't hear you currently.
What about now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, this is going to be an issue because whenever I turn on my Word file, let me see if I can print it, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, we can come back to you.
We can come back to you, yeah.
You go ahead.
Okay, maybe we can, one moment. Hona, maybe we can start by giving some context about why Amharas are fighting as Professor Adamu resolves his audio issue. What do you think?
Sure, I can do that. So I think for those who are not really who have not been closely following the development in Ethiopia, it's important to understand that this escalation is not a sudden one. It has been in the making for decades. In fact, it's not even years; it's decades. And I think probably a more sensible period to start with the Amhara's grievance is a dark period, I guess, or even before that. I think there are writings about Amharas that really portray them in a very negative way. So I think one reason Amharas are finding themselves in this perpetuate cycle of violence and subjugation is there is an epistemic violence against them, and by epistemic violence I mean, you know, the use of like certain kind of scholarship to really vilify and demonize an entire group of population, and in this case Amhara. And often that takes a tone of like, you know, they were dominant in the past period, or they are somehow benefited from system in the feudal system and others. But obviously a more serious scholarship have shown that that's not the case, and Amharas were equally subjugated by, you know, past rulers, including feudalism. And the average farmer is actually Amhara farmer is actually way much more poor than other regions, farmers in other regions. And this is you know, just a basic review of poverty statistics would reveal. So, but there has been a certain form of scholarship by ethno-nationalists within Ethiopia, but also I think beyond that, certain scholars within the West who wrote early works about Ethiopia and portrayed Amharas really in a negative way, and that has been, you know, sustained for political reasons. So there is the first one is there's demonization and vilification of Amharas, not just in the political landscape, which is very widespread and a very common occurrence, but unfortunately within the sort of academic discourse as well, and that is very much related to in part how you know the Italy's colonial ambition in Ethiopia fared, because they were trying to divide Ethiopians along ethnic groups to make it easier for them to subjugate, and they had to create this narrative of one group being you know, privileged or favorable than others. And I think there is also, as part of that narrative, there's an attempt to, you know, minimize the role of other ethnic groups in state building, but also entirely describe the relationship among Ethiopians solely within ethnicity framework, while none of the areas in Ethiopia are homogeneous, and Ethiopians are very much intermarried and intermixed. You know, there's often an attempt to apply a very you know, reductionist ethnicity framework where, you know, every human being is reduced into ethnicity, and then everything else that doesn't fit into this story is essentially disregarded or considered as invalid neology. So that is what I mean by epistemic violence. In 1990s, obviously, this form of scholarship became the anchor of nation state, and ethno-nationalists such as TPLF and OLF come to power and made this scholarship, you know, a way of redefining the state, the Ethiopian state, and that led into, you know, not only dividing Ethiopia along ethnic lines and portraying, you know, this ethnic homelands are homogeneous, while actually, you know, that's not the case. But also there has been, you know, an attempt to intentionally marginalize Amharas from political space, from representation. And an example could be, you know, how Amharas were excluded from the writing process of the constitution that's in place in Ethiopia. And at that point, you know, some ethnic groups had multiple representatives, you know, 5, 6 political parties, but no one has represented Amharas. So essentially, they were denied a chance to present themselves and their view of what Ethiopia should look like, and that led into, you know, exclusion of them in a number of structures, be it political representation. An example could be in Oromia, there are millions of Amharas, but no one. They are not recognized, let alone, you know, political representation, and their identity is denied in some places such as Dredwa, where Amharas are one of the largest groups. The other ethnic group is divided. Essentially, almost the power cities, and Amharas are not recognized and not given a quota, while they are 30% of the total population, at least by the government's admission. And another element is obviously annexing areas such as Walkite and Raya. Those areas have always been, inhabited by Amharas, and when the new constitution and this redrawing of Ethiopia was done in early 1990s, this Amhara identity of these people was denied, and they were included into Tigray region. That has always been, a center of contestation between Amhara and Tigray region, but TPLF was a dominant power, and they were able to suppress the people's quest for identity recognition and justice for decades. But in 2018 and 2017, Amharas came out saying enough is enough, and that is in collaboration with the protest in Oromia region that led into actually Abiy came into power. So the other element of structural violence is denial of identity of Amharas and annexing their lands to other regions. Obviously, these are underlying political issues that have lingered for decades, but since Abiy came to power, new, much more pronounced kind of problems have also emerged. For instance, the targeted killing of Amharas that started during the Dark regime in Oromia become really much more frequent, and the number of people killed in just a day increased to 100. As an example, could be Tole massacre, where more than 550 people were killed. So there are new aspects of prosecution of Amharas, particularly in Oromia, but also exclusion of Amharas from their own capital city. Like Amharas are probably maybe at least from the only ethnic group that I know that have been denied access to their capital. So Addis Ababa has a number of entry pointers, but entry lines from Amhara region to Addis Ababa have been frequently closed by Oromo Prosperity Party forces, and Amharas were denied access to their capital. And obviously, this is devastating. People have lost their lives while they were trying to get medical attention in Addis Ababa. But also, the number of Amharas were expelled from Addis Ababa and nearby, and as a way of containing the largely predominantly Amhara population in Addis Ababa, the Oromo regional government came up with a plan of establishing a new city, which they called Shagar City. And this, by their own admission, is intended to choke Addis Ababa and subjugate the Amhara-dominated Addis Ababa residents. And this is by a regional president's explanation. I'm not saying this word, this is their words. And as part of that, hundreds of thousands of houses that belong to non-Amharas, that belong to non-Oromos, majority of them Amharas, were demolished, and Amharas were sent to some places in such as Debrecen and others. So they are internally displaced people now and looking for shelter. And all this time, when the grievances are raised, the response has been arresting anyone who dares to raise concerns of Amharas. That's what led into repeated arrest of Amhara journalists, Amhara activists, and Amhara political leaders. And obviously the triggering impact, and the triggering could be, the Pretoria Peace Deal, because the Pretoria Peace Deal, Amharas prepared themselves. They formed a delegation and argued rightly that they had a particular issue that they want to negotiate with TPLF when it comes to Walkite and Raya, and for the interest of sustainable peace in the area. But both Abiy and the Western diplomats really excluded Amharas from the peace deal. And Amharas said that we've paid sacrifice to liberate these areas and let them enjoy their Amhara identity, but if the peace deal is meant to give back these areas to PLF, we're not. If the option is ethnic apartheid, as there was a case in these areas for 3 decades, then it's better for us to resist than sit and watch on the side. And an important step to that direction was taken by Abiy Ahmed when he disbanded the Amhara Regional Special Force, and rightly many took that as the final preparation to get back Walkait and Raya to TPLF, and that led into protest across the region, and it kind of evolved into the resistance that we are seeing now. I kind of gave an overview of what major issues, but I think there are much more grievances that I didn't cover. But for the interest of time, I think we can go to the next topic. Robert.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Hona, for that very informative explanation. Now I'd like to go back to Professor Adamu. Professor Adamu, if you're now able to speak, please go ahead and maybe try. Professor Adamu, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay. I see that Professor Adamu's mic is not muted, but for some reason I can't hear him. Hona or Ted, can you guys hear Professor Adamu?
No. So I guess we can go to Dr. Sanait maybe, and then we'll come back.
Okay. Dr. Sanait, are you able to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. So maybe, I know that everyone here knows you, but maybe just a brief introduction about yourself and about your organization, and then maybe we can go straight into your talking points.
Okay, thank you very much for hosting this program. It's a very much needed program because of what our people are going through on the ground. My name is Sanait, Director Sanai. I am the Director of the Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia, or GPE. By trade, I'm a researcher, biosecurity researcher. I think that's enough for now. Yeah. So basically, all of you have covered in terms of why why our people are fighting this, resisting this invasion by the regime's forces into the region. I would just give it really the context in terms of how the genocide has been progressing through the years. Basically, like Hona described, this system has already painted Amharas as all sorts of things, colonizers, oppressors, etc. A lot of fake narratives has been seeded into the population, not only in an informal political discourse, but actually using structural and systemic methods like curriculums, like regional anthems, like speeches given by a very highly appointed officials, directives and guidelines that people usually listen to from their heart, because on a normal day in a peaceful country, a citizen usually listens to what the government says. So for 30 years, Amharas have been painted as the monster in the country. It didn't end that. While doing that, Amharas have been killed all over the country. And I always say this for a very selfish reason. When TPLF and OLF imposed this system on Ethiopia, although they had two things in mind. Of course, breaking a huge parts of the country territory and building Greater Tigray and Greater Oromia. In the process, if the country balkanizes, they didn't care. If that doesn't happen, and if the people just really are happy to be enslaved, then to have a sort of loose confederate system where they use the nation's resources and they build their quasi countries. But that being long term. But the very selfish reason to start with is for TPLF's dream of, containing Walqait within their administration. So something when a force, an ultra nationalist force like TPLF is so focused on an agenda like that for a very self-serving reason, it ended up imposing something that will destroy millions of lives. So I always say, when we studied this genocide as an organization that tries to prevent further genocide on Amhara people and other similarly targeted people, what we've studied is that everything that they did in Walqait, it is a blueprint, the map for what everything else that they have done elsewhere in the country, be it in Matakkal, be it in Arsi, Bagugu, anywhere else, what they did, how they skillfully combined direct massacres, covering people into a different identity, because being called Amhara is so much demonized that people actually chose to be something else sometimes. This is a perfect example or definition, according to the UN, of genocide is taking children by force and raising them as a different identity, what in Ethiopia usually just called gudifecha, but when it's forced, so that's one of also the kind of cultures that were taken from Oromo speaking areas, but when it's done in a forced way, then that is also one indicator of genocide. So basically, they didn't care about how this will impact the nation, the region, but they needed to impose the system in order to get that area and they transferred that same system, like targeting people in terms of, this narrative, making them hated elsewhere, driving them out of their native land in hundreds of thousands, changing place names into different languages. This has been happening elsewhere, and the blueprint is from Walqait. So the reason I'm saying all this is because we've been seeing this same method happening all over the country for 30 years, and by systematically implanting for every other community in Ethiopia that it is okay to treat Amharas this way, it became a status quo. So when Amharas were not even, organizing as Amharas, they recognized something was wrong. Just as individual citizen Ethiopians, they were saying, they were like joining pan-Ethiopian movements like G7, etc., Samurai Party. They were just generally saying this system is genocidal. The ethnic apartheid has to go. The ethnic federalism has to go. And then they were painted as if they're Unitarians. They just were going for one language, one religion, etc. So all this is a coordinated plan B and C they had. Whenever we wake up and say, hey, this is genocidal, this is wrong, they would come and say, for the rest of the communities in Ethiopia, they're trying to impose their cultures again on you. So there was no other option for Amharas left except to organize as their own and take the truth. It's not even their truth. There's only one truth, and that is they're being targeted. We're being targeted for our identity. There is no other option. The country is very close to balkanizing. It's not Amhara's fault it's balkanizing. It's because they have been sowing this distrust and hate against people, but Amharas cannot be the scapegoat anymore. So to wrap up in terms of the background, what happened is all the millions of people, millions who survived genocide across the countries, Wallagga, Matakkal, even around Addis Ababa, like millions are now pushed into the Amhara region. Everybody thinks, oh, it's the diaspora that's radicalizing the Amhara people. That's not the case. So now Amharas in the Amhara region are firsthand listening one-on-one what happened to these people. So the Amhara region has amazingly become so dense because IDPs are being pushed into it over its capacity. It's already under budgeted. So what happens is when the IDP camps cannot handle them anymore, it could be Debre Berhan, Gondar, Fenote Salam, you can go anywhere. Jara, hike anywhere, like all over Amhara region, Zata, anywhere you go, there are IDPs from outside the region. And what happens is because there's no enough resources and the money that goes to them is embezzled anyway, they will keep on being absorbed by the community, the Amhara region community. They're already under budgeted and they're already holding on to these people. And remember, there's no budget for Walqait and Raya as well. That's also on top of the Amhara people budget. So what happens is now, because of this mingling, the Amhara people now understand what has been happening to other Amhara. So this is the critical mass waking up. So now when they see what is supposed to be the National Defense Force wearing, what's supposed to be the National Defense Force, now being constituted by OLA Shani people, which they saw, did all these horrific things that their folkmen told them, and now that same force is coming into the region. What do you expect people will do? Oh, come and finish us off? That's not going to happen. So what Amharas are doing is actually resisting something that their other folkmen faced in settings where they cannot resist because they were minoritized. But at least here, there is some semblance of network they could use. Their languages in use. The Amhara region is a quasi-safer area in terms of, because it's labeled for them, but it's not safe for long anymore because the local constitution itself doesn't label it for them. So this is Amharas waking up, saying, no, you're not gonna finish us up. This system is not for us. We're going to remove the threat first, and then remove the actual threat, which is the system which let this happen forever. And then we will set a system that will not allow our demise anymore. So for me, this is a very simple, straightforward, and what I beseech other Amharas and anyone who has a heart to do is to forget documenting this as if it's some rebel group taking town after town. These towns are Amhara people themselves wanting to expel a genocidal force that's coming to kill them, to rape them, to horrifically murder them. And the reason they won't stop at the region is because they have already heard what happened to their people. They will not want for this to continue. They know the system is the problem and the system has to go. And this is all our stance, I believe. So, and I know so, because we are all working as one. We want to prevent this genocide forever. That is the message that I want to send. While I'm here, I think we've just are hearing that the regime, I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the regime has been transporting the regime has been transporting military and other logistics that could effectively, literally commit mass atrocities and mass murder in Amhara region. Because of this, Fano has been giving information to the local medias, and while I have this opportunity, I just want to read out what the Fanus have said in terms of trying to deter further genocide in the area. So this is what the message they sent out. To Ethiopians and the international community, the Ethiopian government has declared genocide on Amhara people and waged war with all its might over the past 3 months. In this line, as we speak, the dictator Abiy Ahmed and his regime is using the nation's civil airlines, Ethiopian Airlines, to transport weapons and soldiers to Bahir Dar to support the full-fledged war on the Amhara people. Therefore, in order to protect the Amhara people from further attacks and extermination, we would like to inform Ethiopians and the whole international community that we have been forced to take action against any kind of flights to Bahir Dar since the publication of this article. Fano. So I'm saying this out loud now because we've seen how this force has been firing Zu-23
on helpless IDP camps in Kiramu, Walaga. So that's the same exact same thing that they're trying to replicate. And we've already had reports like Robel and Hona said that they have been gunning down people in Gondar. And today in Bahardar, they have gunned down homeless people around some localities. I don't have the exact locality on my I don't remember it now, so I don't want to make a mistake, but I think it's around Papyrus. So with this, I want to wrap up, and maybe I will be around for a question and answers. And I just really would like to thank AAA for facilitating this so that, especially the international community and others can have direct information. And so there is no misinformation or disinformation by enemies of Amhara people in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sennight, as always, for that very articulate explanation and overview. We really appreciate your work. And
Robel, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Hona, I can hear you.
Hone, I can hear you.
Okay, I think I can hear. I'm not sure if I can hear Robel. Dr. Sennight, can you hear Robel, or is it just me?
Yes, I can hear all of you, Tej, Hona, and Robel.
Okay, I can't hear you, Robel, so please go ahead.
Okay. So apologies, everyone. I think there's been some audio issues today. But I was just saying, maybe Hona, if you could mute your mic. Okay. I was just saying thank you so much, Dr. Sennight, for that very informative and detailed overview of what's been going on. I invite everyone to, once again, refer to the pinned tweets. We have a lot of very informative information above. And if you're not already following the people on the panel, please do follow them. Please do please do follow them, and please do review their tweets. There's lots of informative information from the team at AAA, from Dr. Sennight, from GPE, Professor Adamu, and so I think there's going to be a lot to benefit from following these accounts. And as Hona just resolves his audio issues and returns, I'd like to now see if Professor Adamu's audio issue is resolved. Professor Adamu, if you're able to speak, please unmute your mic. And
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. My goodness. I was a nervous wreck to start with, and now this hasn't helped. But let's see.
No problem. Professor
the last
Adamu.
time I used to speak on a regular basis was during the Zamacha 50 years ago. So got to work on this one.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, I'd like to thank AAA, its esteemed chairman, Ato Tordes Turfe, and his indefatigable colleagues, Ato Hone Vandefro and Ato Robel Alamo, for facilitating this discussion and inviting me to participate as a guest speaker. And I would also like to say a shout out to my old Twitter space friends. I know I've been AWOL for the past, 6 months or something, but it was something that I had to do. In any case, I just wanted to say that I'm honored to be part of a distinguished panel, which includes Dr. Sennight, who has been a tireless voice for the thousands, about millions of displaced and massacred Ethiopians for many years. I have had the pleasure of interacting with her as a part of another group. So we have a history, something of a history together. I was hoping that I was going to say that Professor Achamar Tamburu is somebody I have admired from a distance, because I used to watch his tassels with Isgail Gabisa in particular. And I was going to be very happy that we're going to meet, directly, but that's not to be. Now, let me get back to the substance of my discussion, my presentation. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Professor Adamu.
Okay. I have to share with you that as I sat down to prepare for this event, I felt a heavy burden of responsibility wash all over me. To letting you in on a little secret, I'm a person who occasionally experiences twinges of imposter syndrome. Anyway, here was I, a 75-year-old man enfeebled by old age and Parkinson's disease, with nary a single day's experience of living through the terror, chaos, destruction, and living hell of actual combat, and without any possibility of experiencing it in the future, pondering the weighty topics of war and peace. I had to ask myself some hard questions. Am I the right person for this? And am I beating up the war drums, knowing fully well that I should not have to smell the intoxicating odor of cordite, be singed by the suffocating flames, or feel the sharp sting of a lead bullet in my body? Above all, am I rebuffing efforts of genuine, seasoned peacemakers in exchange for an uncertain future, and so on? The answers I got reassured me that the course the Amhara people were on was the only alternative left to them. First, Amharas are flocking to the battlefront not because they are fire-breathing warmongers. Quite the contrary, they joined the struggle because they were not left any alternative. After decades of being pushed around, abused, displaced, and massacred in the most brutal manner one can imagine, their cup of endurance had overflowed. Hordes of government-trained, equipped, and fed members of the NDF, whom the Amhara founders had bailed out barely 2 years ago when TPLF and OLF terrorists were baying at the gates of Debre Sina, descended on every town and hamlet inhabited by Amharas. I was in Ethiopia that November, I think it was in 2020 or 2021, when the US Embassy in Addis Ababa was frantically urging all its citizens to leave Ethiopia. In any case, to add insult to injury, the government deliberately sent its occupying forces smack in the middle of the critical planting season. This was not by accident. The second question I had to answer, or to my satisfaction, was whether people like me were not being too obstructionist and rebuffing the efforts of the US and EU so-called peacemakers. The answer to this question was an unequivocal no. Let us examine the US's and the EU's record as peacemakers vis-a-vis Ethiopian conflicts. In 1991, at the so-called London Peace Conference, Herman Cohen, head of the Africa desk of the US State Department, assembled the EPLF, TPLF, and the OLF. These are forces which were sworn to destroy Ethiopia. In any case, he gave them free rein to rule Ethiopia as they saw fit. Among other things, the result of this travesty was the loss of Ethiopia's outlet to the sea, the introduction and implementation of an ethno-fascist constitution, which has spawned all the intractable problems that are roiling the country to this day. Then came the feeling of a deja vu in Pretoria, Nairobi, when last November, Ambassador Hammer assembled essentially the TPLF and OLF and got them to crank out an agreement. The AAA made formal objections to a negotiation that excluded many important stakeholders, among them the Amharas and the Afars, whose territories had been ravaged by the TPLF, as Getachew Reda said, to settle scores, especially with the Amharas. Mr. Hammer was not only unwilling to listen to such objections, but he has been deploying a familiar cast of questionable characters to sell this defective and highly toxic document to the broader Ethiopian community and to the outside world. The next question I had to ask myself was whether these were mere anomalies or part of a pattern emanating from the very nature of American foreign policy. Allow me then to touch upon the highly flawed US foreign policy playbook, which has doomed many US initiated and led decisions to spectacular failure. There is little disagreement that US foreign policy, like any other nation's policy, is motivated by self-interest, enlightened or otherwise. The core foreign policy of the US is driven by the following fundamental goals: curbing the spread of communism, competing for raw materials on a global scale, expanding markets for US products and services, and maintaining US hegemony on global affairs, etc. To this end, it utilizes the following potent tools: deploying operatives as foreign aid workers and humanitarian volunteers, manipulating the various branches of the United Nations and the Security Council, using the various lending institutions to strong arm recalcitrant nations, utilizing the might of the military industrial complex to maintain US hegemony, and corralling the corrupt corporate media to distort the records of perceived enemies and elevate those deemed allies. And above all, to use religious institutions, especially fundamentalists, to further US policy. In his 2008 book, The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power, now a Netflix series. This is something that I would urge everybody to read and or watch the series on Netflix. Believe me, you will not be disappointed. It will spell out everything that has gone wrong with American foreign policy. So now a Netflix series as well, Jeff Charlotte shows how a shadowy fundamentalist group initially put together by Abraham Verland, a right-wing Norwegian immigrant, has controlled the direction of US foreign policy since 1957, beginning with the Eisenhower administration, continuing on to the present day, irrespective of whether Democrats or Republicans are in power. Charlotte shows how, with off the books, deep pockets, Verland, Doug Coe, and Coe's successor, his son, have used the annual National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. as their private vehicles for dictating the U.S. foreign policy agenda on behalf of the fossil fuel industry and agro-industrial farmers. Mind you, this person, Jeff Charlotte, was invited by the group to actually go and study them. So this is not some hit job by some random, conspiracy theorist. Okay, he was actually invited. So, but decide for yourselves: read the book or watch the series. A defining characteristic of this group is that it gravitates towards foreign leaders with dictatorial tendencies. Let me tell you who is regarded as a shining example for emulation. They have hoisted King David of biblical times. You will recall that King David had seen his general's wife, Bathsheba, and he desired her, and he had basically raped her while her husband was fighting a war that David had started. When she became pregnant, he actually had the temerity to assign him to a really hard, harsh, risky frontline duties, which ensured that he was going to get killed. But this group believes that this person is a worthy example because, he had the complete control of his followers. And that's the one thing that they look for. So a defining character of this group is that it gravitates towards foreign leaders with dictatorial tendencies. The important thing for them is that the leader in question have a substantial loyal following, a tendency which has been implicated in causing America's foreign policy disasters. Consider this: Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines, Reza Pahlavi in Iran, Mobutu Sese Seko in Congo after the CIA toppled Patrice Lumumba, popularly elected prime minister. Omar Trujillo of Panama, Anastasio Somoza of Nicaragua, Fulgencio Bautista in Cuba, Nguyen Van Diem in Vietnam. The most spectacular of U.S. foreign policy missteps, says Amy Chua in her recent book, Political Tribes, Groupthink, and the Fate of Nations, happened in Vietnam, when U.S. foreign policy makers completely misunderstood the visceral hatred which drove the Viet Cong, hatred for the Chinese minority, which had a death grip on the Vietnamese economy, rather than a burning desire to establish a communist state. They completely misread this. Well, we all know how costly that mistake was in American and Vietnamese lives, not to speak of the horrific ecological damage it unleashed. Added to that are recent policy disasters in Libya, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, and so on that I need not go into because you're all familiar with the aftermath, where thriving, sometimes even ancient civilization have been turned into rubble. Finally, in his damning book, The Road to Hell, The Ravaging Effects of Foreign Aid and International Charity, Michael Maron implicates all the foreign aid companies as being instruments of American and Western foreign policy. This guy was an 18-year-old veteran of the USAID, and he shows how the US and USSR played musical chairs in the Horn of Africa in the 1970s, wasting billions, if not trillions, of dollars for purely political purposes. Can the world afford this kind of policy, foreign policy? In his highly influential book, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of a World Order, Samuel Huntington, whose work it started as an article which appeared in Foreign Policy magazine and then was turned into a book, he says, the founding fathers of the US saw diversity as a reality and as a problem. Hence, the national motto, E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one, chosen by a committee of the Continental Congress consisting of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. Later, the political leaders who also were fearful of racial, ethnic, economic, and cultural diversity, which indeed produced the largest war of the century between 1815 and 1940, responded to the call of bring us together, and made the promotion of national unity their central responsibility. The one absolutely certain way of bringing this nation to ruin, of preventing all possibility of its continuing as a nation at all, warned Theodore Roosevelt, would be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities, pages 305 to 306. Yet, when it comes to Ethiopia and Africa, the preferred U.S. foreign policy prescription is the Kissinger doctrine of keeping ethnic groups such as Amhara of Ethiopia constantly at each other's throats and keeping an entire continent fragmented. That way, multinational conglomerates can have unfettered access to Africa's abundant resources. Now, to wrap up, are Amhara interests incompatible with those of the US? As far as I'm concerned, Amharas are mostly moderate to conservative in their world outlook. They're not given to extremist tendencies. They are hardworking believers in the American dream. If you see, for example, the Triple Package, again, another book by Amy Chua and her husband, you'll see that Ethiopians were, along with the Nigerians, were one of two groups that were mentioned as, part of the success story of the present era, which replaced the WASPs of years ago. Anyway, they worked well with the British during the Second World War. You will recall that the heroes of the Second World War in Ethiopia, Belaiza Lega, they were operating in what is now called the Soma Baraha, Bishana area. That's what allowed the British to come, and Haile Selassie himself to come into Gojam, where he spent at least 2 weeks in safety in Debre Marcos before he proceeded to Addis Ababa. So there's no question about the fact that Amharas have played a major role and have assisted the British in their quest. It was the resistance of the Amharas in there that allowed the British to complete, to tie down in a lot of Italian soldiers and things like that. Also, the same thing in Korea. The U.S., has already, testified that Amhara and other Ethiopian troops in Korea and the Congo acquitted themselves magnificently. So we worked together, and as I say here, they do not have a knee-jerk yearning to get into bed with either the Russians or the Chinese. But that doesn't mean that they can't keep their options open. They want to preserve a multipolar world with the U.S. playing a balancing. Now, I know I already said in closing, but this is the real in closing. Lest anyone think I'm being too critical of the U.S., please note that I made the foregoing remarks out of a sense of disappointment, disillusionment. You see, I am somewhat unique in that I did not come to the U.S. as a political or economic refugee. I first entered the U.S. as a tourist in 1983, thereafter making numerous trips with my multiple re-entry and exit visas. Then in 1989, I was offered a graduate assistantship to work on my PhD. In short, I came here as a professional with my own money, and I could have resettled just about anywhere. At the time, I had a British passport, which allowed me to settle down anywhere in the EU. And I could have resettled just about anywhere, but I chose to live in the United States. All I'm saying is that US foreign policy is failing. Look at what is happening in Ukraine. And as a US taxpayer myself, I believe the Amhara people and the American people in general deserve better. I'll leave it at that, and I hope I got across to you guys. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for that overview, Professor Adamu. It was very informative with a lot of references and reading material. So I trust that our listeners can go back and re-listen and potentially do further reading to learn more of some of the things you said. And with that, I think we've covered all of the major panelists. So I'm going to now go, Hona, if there was anything that you wanted to add before we go to closing remarks, anything that was missed?
Maybe a bit on the possible scenarios that we can expect on the developments from the ground. Do you want to say that, or do you want me to say a few things about that?
Maybe you can go ahead and I can just go after you.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's in everyone's mind where this is heading, given the developments and the stakes involved. As we've been talking about, almost close to 1 million inhabitants being under siege, and in cities like Gondar, and the intention and track record of NDF, as we know, is very much tainted with crimes and persecution of Amharas and others. So we're very much concerned. So I think we believe best case scenario and the most likely one would be, for Amharas to, kind of for once flip the order of things and be on the speaker side and willing to work with others, because really at the heart of what has been brewing for decades is constant. Obviously, subjugation and victimization of Amharas, but also a denial of opportunities to have sincere conversation about what we want and what others want vis-a-vis the Ethiopian state, and that, as Professor Adamu has also alluded, that often involves foreign powers as well. So we're hoping that the development will evolve into a situation where Amharas can become victorious, and Abiy is forced either out of power or is willing to have a genuine negotiation somewhere or another. And we believe that is very likely, and I think that is in the best interest of everyone to support, because where the other alternative would be a military occupation. If Abiy for some miraculous, development of things, manage to occupy the region, that will be military occupation. It has become obvious that the Amhara people have said enough with Abiy administration. We knew Abiy administration does not have legitimacy in Amhara region and among Amharas all over the country, and that's precisely why we asked a separate delegation for the negotiation in Pretoria. But if anyone was doubting on that, I think the turn of events over the last few days and few weeks have made it clear that Abiy has no place in Amhara's mind, and they are determined to liberate themselves from this OPP apartheid that's been being on the formation for the last 4 years. But even that, Abiy succeeds in military occupation. What does that mean? That essentially does not mean anything other than loss. Like, there's no way Abiy will win this war because he has already lost the people. And the world history have shown us that when people rise up saying enough is enough collectively, that is the most formidable power. That is very significant power, and they will not be subjugated for a long time. And therefore, I think it's important that there is to recognize that Abiy has already lost the Amharas and the fight against Amhara, and his war on Amhara, because the people have risen up, and there is no way any military might can subjugate them. But that does not mean the regime will not have a capacity to inflict pain and genocide on Amhara people. So far, the large-scale genocide was restricted into other regions, Benishangul Gumuz, Oromia, but this would be an opportunity for the regime to bring the similar kind of atrocity, genocidal violence into Amhara region, and that's really where we're concerned, and we want everyone to raise the alarm. It is clear that there is no way Amhara region would be under Abiy's administration, and this should be enough to stop this attempt of subjugating Amharas, which will never become successful. Obviously, there was small chance again. There is a chance of protracted fighting. Amharas know this. They are prepared for that, I think, because we know we've been marginalized from the state structure, and we know we don't have some of the resources the state apparatus might mobilize, and therefore there might be small chance of protracted war. But actually, that's even much more disastrous for the country, because that would mean essentially Amhara region will become a de facto separate state, and the rest of the country will be dismembered. And so that effectively would mean the country disintegrates, and that makes it, the entire Horn of Africa, a non-stop civil war, probably for a long period of time. And that is going to be, in fact, much more disastrous, which is why we're saying it's in the best case scenario. It's in the best case scenario for Amharas, but also Ethiopians in the larger region, for Abiy to go. Abiy must go. And then any imagination of peace and justice and accountability in Ethiopia should start from holding Abiy and his forces accountable for all atrocities they have committed in just 5 years. But obviously, Abiy is not a newcomer. He has been part of APRDF and part of this ethnic apartheid system. So the solution is not just changing Abiy with another person, which was the case in 2018. We kept the structures intact. We basically recycled the same folks who have ruined the country for decades. And at this point, it must be clear that any cosmetic change like the one that happened in 2018 is not going to save Ethiopia. We will find ourselves in a perpetual cycle of violence unless we start to have conversation about the underlying causes of hatred, contestation, and impunity in that country. And that can only be done if we start holding the people that messed this country for far too long accountable. So any post-Abiy period should anchor transitional justice through accountability and really genuine reconciliation in the country. We have suffered enough, Amaras have suffered enough, but others have also. And we cannot enable this politicians that often promise promise peace and prosperity, but in actually deliver war and non-stop violence. We have to imagine a future outside them. We have to imagine a different future for the interest of the country, for the interest of Hamas, for the interest of everyone involved and is really invested in peace in the region and the world at last. And the experience so far have shown us that the minimum requirement for that is to really start with accountability for crimes committed so far, and with a genuine transitional system where we address the underlying systems, and that requires supporting the struggle of Amaras for justice. Amaras know the plights and the crimes and atrocities other ethnic groups have suffered. We know what the Sidamas are going through. We know what the Walaitas are going through now because they are denied the opportunity of becoming, a region while others are given. We know what's happening to the Sidamas, to the several people in the southern region. We know the effort of Oromizing Harar, where Harare people are denied the opportunity to speak their own language. We know what's happening in Dredaw, where there's an active project of, trying to make Dredaw part of Oromia region. We know what's happening to the Simalis, where they are constantly attacked and are being denied of their right to live peacefully in that area. So although as much as we are, cognizant of our community's pain that span decades, we also understand that other communities have faced the same issues. And that's why I think we believe, taking this conversation into, a different kind of articulation of the relationship among Ethiopians and the relationship between Ethiopians and the state should happen right now, because we cannot continue to suffer non-stop at the hands of this Medicare, hateful and populist and really ineffective and politicians that have been in power for far too long, at least for 3 decades. So all the scenarios really have to lead into that, and I think we believe the people are determined and they're facing the regime like with full determination to liberate themselves for once and all, and that is a likely scenario that we hope everyone would support. With that, I guess I can stop and let Robel to chime in or move on to the next.
Thank you, Hona. I think at this point, I'm seeing a lot of discussion in the comments. I'm receiving some private messages as well. So I think it might be a good opportunity to move into some Q&A, even if it's very brief. So for those who are listening, if you do have questions that you'd like the panelists to address, please request mic, and we can let you come up and ask your questions. We just ask that before you ask the question, you identify your name, where you're based, and any organizational affiliations. So at this point, we're going to open up the space to questions. Simply just request mic, and we'll try and give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. And if there are no questions, we can go into closing remarks. I'm going to defer to Ted. If you can hear me, please make an indication. Otherwise, I'll see if I can message Ted. But I see somebody who's requested. Etewa, can you hear me? Are you able to speak?
Rubil, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Etewa, if you're speaking now, you're muted. Please unmute your mic and try to speak.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I think you're muted now.
Dr. Senait, I can hear you.
Ted, that was
Senait, can you hear me? I can hear you.
Ted, that was one of the people who came up to ask a question. Okay, it seems she's left. If there are any other people who want to ask questions, please request. Otherwise, we can go to Ted to close the space. Okay, I don't see any requests. So, Ted, if you can hear me, you can go ahead and provide closing remarks. Ted, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Robel Hone, can you hear me?
Okay, maybe as we resolve Ted's audio issue, I do see a few requests now. So let's see if we can get them up. I see requests from a few people, including the previous speaker. So let's start with Itewa. If you can hear us, please try and speak again. Okay, I think Itewa is having connection issues. Next, maybe we can go to Laaka. Laaka, if you can speak, please.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Robel. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation. And I have grave concern, actually, and I don't know how this could be addressed, but this apprehension of Amharas in Addis Ababa and where they're gathering them right now, and then they are taking them from that to unknown destinations. Okay, to me, this has actually a big resemblance with what the Nazi Germany was doing to the Jews in the concentration camp. So we have to demand immediately, to know whereabouts, and we have to ask for an international group, a Red Cross, to identify where these individuals are taken. So and I've been trying to find out information. So nobody knows where they are taken from these school grounds. So I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Number one, I think earlier Dr. Sanait, very well spoke regarding the intention of how they want to use this artillery and stuff in the civilian areas, and that's the intent. Precisely what they're trying to do is use, gather the Fanos or even actually now the people who are resisting in certain areas, and also use this occasion to demolish historical places, which I think Robel mentioned, or I don't know, one of the speakers mentioned. So we have to involve third parties here immediately and escalate this, elevate this, so people could go in and actually verify whereabouts of the Amharas are. And also another point is there are many places now where the regime has actually started similar thing in other towns and other regions. So I just wanted to mention these things here for us to consider what the next steps are. So I don't know. It's both comment and really question. So if the speakers could share a few things on these things today. Thank you.
Thank you, Laika, for the question. We're going to see if we can take another question together with that. So Adis Tesfa, if you can speak, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rovel. Thank you for the update. Okay. እኔ በአማርኛ ብናገር ደስ ይለኛል፣ በአማርኛ ብጠይቅ፣ ምክንያቱም ትሰሙኛላችሁ ሁላችሁ። ስለ አፕዴቱ በጣም አመሰግናለሁ። የፕሮፌሰር ስለ ያቀረቡት ሪቪዥን በተለይ አሜሪካ ስለምትከተለው ፖሊሲ በጣም ኢንፎርማቲቭ ስለነበረ በጣም ደስ ይለኛል። የኔ ጥያቄ ትሪፕል ኤም ሆነ ዶክተር ሰናይት የምትመራው ድርጅት ስለ አማራ በጣም ብዙ እንደምትሰሩ እናውቃለን። ፕሮቴክት እናደርጋቸዋለን ሁል ጊዜ በአድቮኬሽን ጊዜ። ግን እንደ አማራ አንድ በጣም ሲሪየስሊ ሊወሰድ የሚገባ ነገር ይታየኛል። የአማራ ቁጥር ሜጆሪቲ እንደሆነ ይታወቃል። በብዙ ነገር የተቀማነውም ማይኖሪቲ እንድንሆን ተደርጎ ነው። የቆጠራው ብዙ ነገር እንዳለ ታውቃላችሁ። ግን ሪኮግናይዝ አድርጋችሁ 30% ሆነ ይመስለኛል ሲናገር፣ እነሱ በሚሉት 30% ያንን ራሱ አክሴፕት አድርገን ልናወራ ይገባል ወይ? ምክንያቱም ይሄ በጣም ሲሪየስ ጉዳይ ስለሆነ ኮንስቲቱሽኑ አማራን አይወክልም። ኤቭሪቲንግ ከአማራ ጋር አግሪድ የሆነ ነገር የለም። ስለዚህ ሁሉ ነገር ኮንስፓይረሲ ስለሆነ ሪኮግናይዝ አድርጎ መጀመሩ ትክክል ነው ብላችሁ ታምናላችሁ ወይ? ምክንያቱም አብዛኛው የአማራ ህዝብ ከሜጆሪቲ በላይ እንደሆነ ነው የሚያውቀው። ኢቭን ከኦሮሞ በላይ እንደሆነ ነው የሚያውቀው። ስለዚህ በድርጅቶቻችን በእኛ በአማራ ድርጅቶች ይሄ ሪኮግናይዝ ተደርጎ
Okay, I'm going to assume you can hear me.
Hi, hi, is that Anne? Hi, Anne. If you could please mute your mic.
Just gonna say and listen to whatever English
Hello?
I can understand. So thank you for including me.
Hello? Okay. Sorry, Anne, if you were speaking, apologies, I had to mute you. We had one of the speakers who was asking a question. So we're just going to take a few questions at a time, and then we're going to move to responses. So we're just going to let Adis Tesfa finish, and then we'll allow you an opportunity to ask your question. Questions can be asked. This is primarily an English language space, but some of the question askers are just asking in Amharic. So we'll allow you to go right after Adis. Adis, if you can please continue.
Of course, I have finished my question. My question was, our organization of Amhara do not recognize the number of what the government says. Why you always say Amhara are 30% or so? We don't want to listen such numbers because it is not. We don't believe in this number. So why do you use these numbers? That was my question.
Okay, thank you, Adis. Next, I'm going to go back to Anne. Anne, if you can unmute your mic now and ask your question. And if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay. So while Anne resolves her audio issue, I think We have now a couple of questions from multiple speakers. The first one was from Laika, and the second one was from Adis Tesfa. So maybe we can start with the question from Laika about the Amhara detainees, and maybe Dr. Sennight, if you could maybe start if you have anything to say. Otherwise, I can give the opportunity to one of the other panelists.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. I'll be very quick. Actually, I thank Lakan for pinpointing to that specific incident. We have, thank you for pinning our latest report on that. We have information that 4,000 just in one day, including members of parliament, Addis Ababa parliamentarian Dr. Kasa, and federal representatives house parliamentarian Christian Tadada have been illegally detained, and I'm only mentioning them because just to highlight how illegal, even in their own framing, because they keep on talking about respecting constitutional rights, and these are individuals that have immunity according to their law of the land. But artists just people for their identity. So when they pick these 4,000 people, they just stop, search, look at IDs, and if the ID is given from an Amhara region, so if people who have IDs on them and it says from the areas they want to target, then those people are detained. There's no explanation. The information we had was especially the one of the worst ones is Kokobet Senior Secondary School, but there are a number of other makeshift places, structures being used for detention. These areas are now people, detained in these areas. Amharas targeted for their identity and abducted are now moved to areas we don't know, undisclosed locations. And we know they have been doing this time and again. They've done this in 2021 when they were targeting, Amharas of all walks of life, journalists, professors, fanos. Same thing happened and has been escalating since April 1st, since the, civilian Amharas, mobilized through the Amhara Popular Committee and called for a popular rally to mark the day, April 1st, where Abiy came to power 5 years ago. And this is specifically done to dispel the narrative that Amhara support Dr. Abiy. They don't. So they had to do that on that day for a very specific reason, to mark that for the international community, for the rest of Ethiopians, for Amharas who are unaware and told this propaganda that Amharas has been killed throughout the newly reformed government. They have tolerated and waited for a reform, hoping things will get better. But throughout this reformed, quote-unquote reformed government, Amharas has been killed across the nation, regardless of what challenges the government can or this regime can cite in terms of war and other Western pressures, etc. Nobody can force you to massacre your own citizens. And ever since that, there were different agendas. They were disbanding the Amhara special forces. And because of that, over 70,000 people ever since April 1 have been in prison because of the declaration of the Amhara Popular Front. They have been, against the front, the leader Iskender. They have been against, the leader of Amhara Popular Forces, Zemene, and their followers, all the other fanos. There are numerous of them, for me to name all of them, but have been independently targeted, and all the civilians that joined them to protect themselves from this, coming impending genocide, have been targeted. And we have our own one of from within the network of our anti-genocide, network within Ethiopia, who gives us information. We have direct information who has escaped prison where he is seen, and this is direct witness information. People being gunned down. They bring them out. They torture them. and just kill them in front of the detainees. And then, so we can say this with great confidence that a complete kill squad has been deployed within the region, and it's even worse than what's happening to Amharas in Addis Ababa. But in comparison, still being abducted from and taken to an undisclosed place and being tortured, and we have already given were given reports, and then I think AAA, and also I can see Yuri Yuri is here. He has gave a platform for one of the lawyers to come and discuss this in detail. But there was a case where they just took, as part of this bout of mass arresting and abducting Amharas, there were specific cases of where they were urinating in the mouths of these detained Amharas. The kind of violation is disgusting. The kind of asserting superiority, the way they were going, it's a completely genocidal and fascistic way of instilling superiority, and in trying to cower people from resisting. They have they have beaten a pregnant woman to a point where she had to miscarry. There are women who were bleeding from their noses and their ears because they have been hit on their head, very heavily by the people who were questioning them. And even the person they detained all this people under, Dr. Wenderson, when he was abducted first, he was hit on his head. So this and then Gannet Asmamo, another journalist who's again detained on a similar charges, has been also very much dehumanized while she was being seized, beaten, and this goes on and on and on. The human rights violation and the ethnic-based identity attack has been going on this bout of mass arrests since April 1st, but similar has been continuously going on since March 2021, which is why Amhara organizations across the globe had to come together and also organized and unorganized individual Amharas from all over the globe went out demonstrating, saying Fano a year ago, because Amharas couldn't even say anything in their own country. They have been abducted, arrested, and tortured, and that is continued with a new force, with a new conviction, just because of the rejection the regime is feeling from the Amhara people, not only from the Amhara people, but from other people who are showing solidarity in the southern nations and in the western parts of the country. So it's very, very, very concerning. But I'm very happy this detail is brought up. Thank you, Lak, and thank you, Robbie, for giving me the chance to speak on this. We have to do absolutely what we can. A regime, a tyrant and genocidal regime who's been exposed for what they're doing could be very, very dangerous on civilians and innocents, because that's where they could show their hate and then their power. So we have to protect these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sennight. I'm going to direct the next question to Hona, and that was the question from Addis Tesfa regarding census data.
Sure. Before going to that, I just want to add to what Dr. Sennight has said about the detentions and the concentration camps in Addis Ababa. Not only people from Amhara region are being arrested, actually people that have Amhara names are also being arrested. So they check ID, and if they believe you are an Amhara, they would just throw you into jail. And that's how genocidal this regime is, in a sense. They don't even have the patience to identify where the people are living. It's just using circumstantial evidence of resemblance of names to an Amhara to arrest people in mass. And not only that, actually, the kind of people they're going after are really poor people that are working on the streets, such as daily laborers and lottery people who cell lottery indicators. So it's again a demonstration of the very cruel system this regime is implementing in Ethiopia, and it's really concerning. They were able to detain thousands, reportedly more than 4,000 people that have been detained in just the last 2 days, and I think that's not adding today's statistics or the numbers from today. So this could essentially turn into tens of thousands of Amharas, because, as I said earlier, majority of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa residents are Amharas, and that actually could be a good segue into the question about Addis, because the statistics I mentioned, the 30% is actually about the number of Amharas in Dredoa, and I qualified that by saying by government statistics, and we know statistics is tortured in Ethiopia to make it appear what the region wants, and this is something that has been going on since TPLF days. We know the statistics about economic growth, about populations are made up in the center in Addis Ababa, and there's no professionalism in the statistics agency. Actually, just a few months ago, they have changed all the pre-existing statistics professionals and directors into an exclusively an Oromo leadership, and the intention is to use the statistical agency to come up with a number that serves the Oromo elite's interest. We know where this is going to head. The same way we have seen, how data about statistics, number of population in Wolkite was basically cooked from in Addis Ababa to support the wrong impression that there are many Tigrayans in Wolkite. The same way the regime is using this office to fabricate statistics. So we know the statistics is suppressed, tortured, and cooked to tell a story and a narrative the government wants. So I agree with Addis on that, that statistics is not believable. But even by the government's statistics, for example, in Dredoa, they have admitted at least 30% of the population is Amhara, and yet they have not assigned 30% of the quotas to Amhara in political power division in Dredoa. Instead, almost the entirety of this positions are divided between the Oromos and other ethnic groups that live there. And the point I'm making is, Amharas are systematically excluded from power and from representation, even when the numbers by government's admission could indicate that they are the majority. So I share the concern about the statistics, and that was the angle it was used. And that's why I think, when it comes to numbers, when it comes to human rights violations, the Ethiopian regime cannot be trusted. And that's why I think the call to involve third parties, international third parties, into investigation of the war crimes that happened already and will likely happen in the coming days and weeks is important. At this point, we know how the regime takes those calls. We have been supportive of the UN, ICHRE, the International Commission of Panels of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, but the regime have refused to let them do their work and have access to sites as they want to do investigation. So we've in the past, insisted this commission should broaden its mandate to look into broader areas, but also ideally the time period is before the breakout of the northern Ethiopia war. But we also, will continue to push that for this round of war crimes that the regime is committing now. We will need. There's a need to set up an independent international investigation mechanism that can get into the factors and hold perpetrators accountable somehow. I think that's all I can say for now.
Thank you, Hona. Next, Professor Adamu, if you have any remarks regarding either of the questions that were asked, I would like to give you this opportunity to speak. If not, we can go to the next question.
I just wanted to say that Addis Ababa today strikes me as the Wild West. I think there was a time when Addis Ababa used to be a killil on its own. I don't know who arbitrarily changed status. We know that, for example, the Harari killil has what, 800,000 max. Addis Ababa, at a minimum has 4 or 5 million people, and it doesn't have any killil status, which means that there's no telling where the Oromo region ends and the Addis Ababa region begins, or Addis Ababa's authority begins. And because of that, you don't know who is arresting whom and where they're taking whoever they decide to apprehend. Um, so this is something that needs to be resolved, because we've heard of the demographic engineering that took place during the Lama Magarsa regime, and what Adanich Abebe has been doing. So it's just this is I do not wish to implicate the entire Oromo people, but it's been said that power is the prerogative of organized minorities, and we have a highly organized Oromo minority which is taking the law in someone's hands. So the law is what it says is the law, and this kind of impunity. Where do you begin to describe the atrocities that this regime has committed? Think of the Shagav thing, that travesty, which is designed to choke Addis Ababa off. And as for the populations and things like that, well, they can cook up the statistics, because they are in charge. This is how it is. It's a very irresponsible, desperate group of people are committed to doing whatever it chooses. And we definitely need to restore the status of Addis Ababa as a distinct entity, assuming that we're going to continue with this horrible Khalil travesty. Because the one thing we need to do is just abolish that, and then we have clear lines of demarcation. Otherwise, you're not going to have a situation where a member of parliament with immunity from prosecution is roughed up and picked up and taken away God knows where. Where else does this kind of thing happen? I'll leave that for now. At that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Adamu. Next, I'm going to go to Anne. Anne, if you have any questions, please, hopefully your audio issue is resolved. Please unmute your mic and try to ask if it works. And for some reason, we've had some audio issues throughout this space. And if maybe if you could try and leave the space and then re-enter and then request to speak again, maybe that will resolve the issue if there's an audio issue, because we still can't hear you.
Yes, you remember that it worked for me, so that might work for you as well. And
okay. I'm not sure if she can hear me. I'm going to see if I can remove Anne from the speakers and then invite her again, and then maybe that will resolve the issue. I'm going to see if I can find her in the audience. Let's see. We have a request also from somebody else. I'm going to add Fasika to the panel. Fasika, if you can speak, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay. Mine is, thanks so much. Hi, guys. Actually, I want to comment on the population of Amhara in Ethiopia. And it's always the largest. And during the TPLF, reduced the reported as a late like a second largest, and Oromo the first largest because of his political game. But I did repost it. I don't know if some of you got it, but Fano reported over 70 millions. Okay, and then there is in Walaga alone is over 9 million, and that they call Oromia state, what Oromia, quote unquote Oromia region, over 29 million Amhara. That's just Oromia region. Okay, so that's beside Afar, Somalia, Ethiopia and Somalia, and South, Dabu, and Gambela. So the total of the Amhara population is over 70 million. So between 70 and 79 million. So that's been reported. And I did post it, and I did also report it to State Department that the Amhara population is the highest population in Ethiopia. So that's, I did report that as well. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Asika, for those remarks. Now, I don't see that we have any more requests, so I'm going to remove.
Actually,
Yes.
I wanted to add a few points here. May I?
Please go ahead.
Thank you for giving me a second chance. So regarding the last two speakers on the population, what we should really take out from this numbers that they are actually minimizing is it should give us information that actually their intent. Okay, we know Amhara is the largest population, it's scattered all over Ethiopia, but when they say Amhara is number 2 or 30 million or whatever this number they're fabricating, we should not take that at all. I think for us we need to believe, and we know it for sure, that actually what they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce the Amhara population through genocide to that number. That's their target. So related to this, then I will lay down the next few points that I wanted to comment. Was number one, actually there is a war crime right now. We are in a war situation. There is a war declared on Amhara people, and we all know the story. This started 4 months ago, right? Not 2 weeks ago. This has been going on for a while. For anybody who wants to really read more, on April 30th, AMBA APU has really written in detail about what was impending on the Amhara people. And we did call for a state of emergency. Please go read that article. I have also shared it on my Twitter space. So somehow the world is silent about this. This morning I was listening to NPR on my way to church, and guess what the talk was? It was about Tigray. It's so bizarre in the world right now. We are actually desperate to find out about even our own relatives in these war zones that actually NPR is just mocking around a war that happened a year or 2 years ago and interviewing people. So there is actually a plan and a design from the side, I would say, of the West to really not even mention what's happening in the Amhara region. I know there are some news outlets that have come out. So this needs to be understood. There is a war crime. Churches have been targeted. Mosques have been targeted. So we know this. So I want to bring this to the audience attention, such that we actually create pressure on our senators, state representatives, wherever we could, number one. Number two, knowing that the government actually is not able to fight with the Fano force, What are they doing? As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Senait said it, and the other speakers also said it. Really, they are targeting the civilian population, right? So the shelling of the large cities, in fact, just coming to this space, I was listening to Hiber Radio. So there is a leaked memo that came out from the army. In fact, clearly they stated the intent now is to go after the civilian population, which means by actually shelling the civilian population and committing a mass genocide, they're thinking the population will reject finals. It's just so handicapped, wicked thinking. So I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Really, the other thing before I leave this space, I want to encourage everybody. I don't know how many people are in this space right now, but there is a drive for everyone to reach out, our senators and congressmen and women. Please reach out, call, and voice our concern, because we are the voice that are outside for all who are under this criminal act right now. So I just wanted to put these things out here. I think I've laid out all my points. Thank you for again giving me a chance, Rubel.
Thank you, Gashlaga. And I think I don't see any more requests for questions from the audience. So at this point, oh, I see. Okay, Fasika has raised her hand. I'm going to give the final opportunity to Fasika. Please go ahead, Fasika.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I forgot to say the demonstration in Addis Ababa is very important to be held as soon as possible. And so since the international community live in Addis, in all the embassies in Addis, and it did made attention last time, right before the TPLF left. So it did made attention to the international community. So the demonstration they did every single day. So that has to be happened, not only United States, but that must happen in the capital city. Okay, that's my highly recommendation. And I've been saying, this. So I've been saying this all along. But this is the best time to do this. And I'm just saying this. It's very important, very important. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Fasika. At this point, I'm going to remove all of the people who came up for questions from the stage. Thank you all for your questions. We really appreciate them, and we tried to provide responses where applicable. At this point, I'm going to give a final opportunity to each of the panelists to give final remarks. Please keep it brief, just 1 minute each, and then we're going to move to close the space. So I'm going to start with Professor Adamu. If you can give just 1 minute closing remarks, and then I'm going to go to Senait and then Hona. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just want to close by saying that one of my concerns about the future is fragmentation. I hope that we'll hold our egos, particularly among the various Amhara groups, hold our egos, collective egos in check, because we don't want to jeopardize this nascent movement. I've been amazed by the miracle that has been created. I'm just impressed by the level of coordination inside the country, and I hope that we do not drag them back. That's the concern I have. So please hold, each other's your egos in check, so that you do not end up, sabotaging this nascent movement. Secondly, I just want to reiterate the fact that the reason that NPR and the others have given us the cold shoulder is because they're under the control of the U.S. government, whether we like it or not. And again, I'm going to urge you to watch or read The Family by Jeff Sharlet. And just one last thing, and then I'll be done. Um, I just want to make sure that we understand that this regime is desperate, and a desperate animal, whether it's a human being or wild animal, is liable to do all kinds of unspeakable atrocities. So we need to be cognizant of that, and just spread the information as much as we can, so that the world, for whatever it cares, at least is aware of what's going on there. And I would leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Professor Adamu. Next, I'm going to go to Dr. Sunnight.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by thanking Triple for holding this space. Tate, Rabah, Hona, thank you for all your tireless work, and all your colleagues at the Triple. Make sure the Amhara cause is not misunderstood, is represented. At the same time, I also would like to thank, my fellow speaker here, Professor Adamu. It's really an honor to be a speaker alongside you. I have learned a lot from you. Thank you very much for your earlier remarks as well. And I also like to thank the people who asked questions, and all the participants as well, to take their time at such time on a weekend. To wrap up, what I want to say is just really two very important points. And one is that don't try to get a parallel for what's happening to Amharas and what Amharas are doing to resist such horror that they had to face for almost half a century. Don't try to get a parallel with other, I don't know, what other rebel groups did in internationally, continentally in Africa or in Ethiopia before. It's a completely different case. This is a case of a very much what I could say is ambitious, at the same time very evil forces wanting to wipe out a population that is majority. Because usually in the past, genocide is attempted to somewhat a minority in an area, and whatever systemic method put in place could happen, could actually take hold, and they're able to make that their plans happen. But this is a case where, like one of the people who asked the question mentioned, Amhara is a majority in this big nation. And although there is a lot of fake narratives and minoritization was happening throughout the last 30 years, at the end of the day, it is a majority in the country. It is an indigenous community. So there is bound to be, when the critical mass finds out what's happening to them, there is bound to be a pushback. That pushback we're seeing. It's organic. So it's not, they're not trying to take back what is theirs. It's theirs already. They're not trying to take back what is someone's. This is naturally, Amharas naturally belong in Ethiopia, and they have been pushed towards extinction, and they're stopping that process. We're stopping that process. So don't try to liken it about and compare it to any kind of rebel group story. Then it will start making sense to you. That is the reason why Fannos are not robbing banks. Fannos are just literally returning the area to the people who live there, and then removing them from enslavement. So I'm just saying this for people, especially for non-Ethiopians, to understand the Amhara struggle in the right light. Apart from that, I just want to reiterate on what Professor Adamu said. This is the time, especially for Amharas, but also for everyone else who understands the just cause of Amharas, to come together, put minor issues on the back burner, because at the end of the day, the destiny of our people, our nation, etc., is going to be determined by those who are fighting the just cause on the ground. So let's try and support this force that is winning against all odds and bring justice for our people and country, especially for those who have been targeted because of their identity, for all the Amharas that have been horrifically being killed by supporting this process. And I'm not saying let's leave problems till the end, till they explode. Let's learn how to do this on the back channel. In that way, in that case, we'll make sure that those who are giving their lives to remove this really genocidal system, their sacrifices will be will be recognized, and we would not be dampening their heroism by trivial issues. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak today. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Sun Knight. Next, Hona.
Thank you everyone for coming. Always, appreciate the time you dedicate to attending this event. And I think in my closing remarks, I want to say like 3 pointers. The first one is I think we have explored or tried to outline why Fanos are fighting, but I think we haven't said enough about who the Fanos are. And given that there are some inaccurate descriptions of the Fanos, it's important to understand that Fano is not it's not a job, part-time or full-time. Being Fano is a cultural practice. It is a practice deeply rooted in Ethiopian history. We have seen Fanos fought the Italian occupation in 1930s, and since then, and it has been a cultural practice where local people pick up arms to defend themselves when a foreign occupying force it tries to occupy their community, or when the government prosecutes them. So it's a cultural practice. It is its identity. It's Amhara's identity. It's part of who we are, and therefore it's not any type of militia either. Militia is a terminology that people use when it is affiliated to states by salary or by extension. But these are individuals, they farmers, doctors who are moved by a just cause and want to protect their community from persecution. That's number one. Second, I think about the Fanos. The Fano has a structure. I think over time we've seen a structure that has emerged, the Fano Military Command, that centralizes operations across these different parts of the region, and this has been reported on the media. And for those interested, I think you just have to Google that, and you will be able to learn more how the Fano structure works and how it is governed from a centralized military command with a recognition of the need to localize and decentralize operations, partly for cultural reasons, partly for logistical reasons. So there's a misconception that there's no structure is a wrong one. Actually, for those who have been following this, there have been public pronouncements how the funds are structured. And the third about the Fanos is like the assertion that the Fanos support the federal government in its war in Tigray is inaccurate. While Fano did fight against TPLF, the main objective was to liberate Walkite and Raya Amhara areas, historically annexed areas from Amhara to Tigray in the early 1990s. And once those areas were successfully liberated, Fano did not advance further into Tigray and had no intention to overthrow TPLF or replace it with another party. So it's important to understand the relationship between Fanos and the Abiy regime. It has always been, contentious, and there was no time the Fanos fought supporting Abiy. That's just a couple of misconceptions that I want to address about Fano, and then. For Amaras, I think it is true that this development has not been well reported, but I invite you to think that, or to approach this issue that it is our responsibility to tell our stories. We have to somehow find a way to tell our own story, be it going to churches where people would listen, be it organizing an event where you are working at think tank, university, workplace, giving informal briefings, hosting dinners with non-Ethiopians to educate them about what's happening, going circulating pamphlets, whatever ways. We have to understand that it is our responsibility to tell our own pain, our own suffering. Others, we need allies. We should build allies, but primarily it's our responsibility. And as a diaspora group that have the means and the freedom to do some of these activities, it should be upon us to really take initiative to ask ourselves, what am I doing? What can I do more? And what other things could be done collectively? And I think instead of kind of like expressing resentment, I think we should approach this lack of reporting as I have to do more to get others to listen to. And this is very important as the war crime in Amhara region intensifies. And finally, for Ethiopians, this is your fight too. As I said earlier, this is a movement for justice, for equality, for unity, for ending division and hatred-based politics in that country, and for ending a non-stop cycle of violence in that country, for finding a peaceful coexistence among these different population groups in Ethiopia, whatever that form would be. We are interested in protecting further violence. Amharas have always expressed their desire to promote unity and peaceful coexistence in Ethiopia. This is also time for you to support Amhara's fight, not just from standpoint of morality and standing for the just cause, but also for your own interest of transforming Ethiopia into a better place for everyone. So I invite everyone to do whatever they can to voice the concerns and the pains of Amharas and hold the genocidal regime in Addis Ababa accountable, but also start conversations with Amharas about what can we do together to make Ethiopia a better place and hopefully post-Abiy period. Thank you.
Thank you, Hona, and thank you to all of the speakers. We covered a lot of ground in today's discussion, and so I hope for those of you in the audience, you took something away from it. For anyone who wasn't able to listen to the